Hello everyone, Tony here. Late last year when Dwayne and I first decided to start the Tree Actions podcast, we initially had some struggles with technology and a couple of our interviews didn't come quite clean on a technical standpoint. The worst of those was with Thor. This is still very much a learning process. I had to put that little disclaimer on the front end of that podcast. So what we decided to do was do a take two. We had a new conversation with Thor. We talked about some of the same things we talked about before, and we added some new things in. So give it a listen. If this podcast has taught me one thing, is any conversation that is meaningful and in-depth is worth having. And that's especially true when talking to somebody as passionate and as knowledgeable as Thor. All right, we're on.
Some things never change. Welcome everybody to another edition of Tree Actions, the Human Forestry Podcast. And our guest today is Thor Clausen, who you may have remembered, some of you that are listening, was on, I think you were the second ever podcast we did. And this will make our 10th, I think. Where we've upped it now, Thor. We're doing 2 a week. Like 2 are being released a week. So we've got quite a few in the queue, and twice a month they come out. Yeah, but yours is, I don't know if you listen to yours, but it's got a lot of rough audio in it. We had something happen with our connection, and we just thought, you know what, let's just do it over. So Thor, how many people have suffered through the audio of the first one, Tony?
There were 38 downloads when I just checked. It's actually not that bad. It's just gets a little glitchy, a little bit of an echo here and there in it.
It does.
Well, Dwayne sounds a little echoey today.
Yeah, I just heard that. I don't know what's going on. It's like we just did one of these earlier today. We'll figure it
out. Like always, we don't follow a script. We don't have anything laid out. But the last time, we went. By the way, I did get a hold of Beaver Bill, and he's quite busy, but he's agreed to do a podcast later this year. So we're hoping to get Beaver Bill on the show. We did record Rip, which you recommended.
You mentioned that. Did you record? Have you done the legend that is Billy Wild?
No, we have not contacted Billy Wild. When Rupert needs to get queued up. Noah Violini's booked on. I don't know if you knew that.
Okay, good.
So we'll have Noah on. Also, Ryan Seneschal. We bumped into him at the conference in Ontario last week, and he's booked on for one. And we just did one with Wenda Lee this afternoon.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And you'll remember Wenda. You took trainer with Wenda back in Florida there. That was an interesting experience.
Yeah, Wenda and Kathy Holzer.
Correct.
Kathy was awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't talked to Kathy in over a decade, so it's been a while. The transition to Bartlett's been good business wise, but it's been kept me out of the loop of the group, which is unfortunate. I keep in touch with a few guys now and again, like yourself, and
yep.
And what's super interesting is like I guess it was 3 summers ago now, just before COVID, when we all met up at Blair Beach's place.
Correct.
I hadn't seen you or Rupee or Norm for a long time, and you get back together with Blair and Karen, and it's just like shacking up at their duplex in Surrey. It just is what it was. Other than there's not a Krispy Kreme right across the road that I had to drag you out of.
Well, Krispy Kreme, I was training down in New Orleans, and for Bayou Tree Service. And it was every morning the guys would bring in Krispy Kreme and they were hot. It was the first time I'd ever heard of this whole concept. And not long, they just started popping up in Canada. So
yeah, they had just opened that one by Blair's place when we were training there. It might have been me and Norm, but I think it was you. And you're standing in line at Krispy Kreme. If there's more than 4 people, they hand you a warm donut off the rack to keep you company while you're standing there. So Jesus, man, that's a death sentence for guys like me that are just about to turn 60.
Oh man, they are so good though, because they're a different type. They're not a cake donut. I can't remember what they're called, but they're a different batter. And when they're fresh, man, they're
there's a reason there's an obesity epidemic. Speaking of New Orleans, Squirrel and Glenn.
Yeah.
What was Squirrel's name? I only remember him as
You're
Squirrel.
talking about Ted Harder?
Could be.
Ted. Yeah.
Him and Glenn were both at the same Train the Trainer with us.
Correct. Yes. They're doing what
But
they're
I
still
only know him
doing
as
well.
Squirrel.
Yeah.
They're both doing well.
Yeah.
Glenn was an interesting guy. So
yes.
Squirrel.
Yes. Yeah. They're both still down there. A lot. Ted sent a video of him out on his kayak on a river somewhere by Baton Rouge, and he was like, this alligator was long as his kayak, and it's on the bank.
Do you remember our first Train the Trainer in Florida? We had to do that. We had to do the walk around with the guy from the camp there, and he took us out to the edge, and he says, "It's alligator breeding season, so don't come around here. And if you hear this bark, just back away." And then it was them, the fire ants, and all stuff that we don't quite get up here.
Yeah, what was it? Bruce said, like, don't go down to the edge of the water with a stick, start splashing around, and make dog noises.
Yeah, exactly.
You probably you don't want to do that. Like, okay, Bruce, I won't.
Exactly. Well, and there was the one year that Bruce announced that we were going to, as a team event, have alligator wrestling.
I was never quite sure if that was true or not.
Yeah, that was that first Train the Trainer down there. The first one at Scott's place was awesome. We were talking about weight earlier. Well, I put on 11 pounds in 7 days for that one because he hired that friend of his who's the chef on the airline chef. Yeah. Right. So you bring in, and of course that's the fried chicken capital. Atlanta's the fried chicken capital of the planet. So remember the lunches they're bringing? A fried chicken breast that was like the size of a small turkey. And it's just nuts. And then that first night after his kid or whoever was shooting people with the paintball gun as they're running across, I think, they had that huge feast at Scott's place where he put us up. It was just amazing food. Yeah. And that first night, I think I told you in that original podcast, was chocolate bourbon pecan pie with homemade French vanilla ice cream. I mean, that was just decadent.
And we've also had Scott Prophet. He's done a podcast, so you'll be able to listen to him soon. In fact, he's coming up next, isn't he, Tony? He's next up, I think.
I think so, yeah. I think so.
Because he's shared some of his stories too, Thor. It's interesting. We're for people that, for any of us that were part of that time, the stories are hilarious and interesting. And I think they can be, but how would you go about describing, if you think back to the pioneering of arborist training, the traveling arborist training show, that Arbor Master, I think it's safe to say Arbor Master because it kind of started something there. And, we were Arbor Master Canada for most of I think all the time that you were part of our training team here in Canada. It was Arbor Master Canada. Like, how would you describe to somebody what it was like, being part of that? Not like, it's one thing if you're on our team, but just what, if you had to share with someone being part of that young human forest as it was growing, going back to, what year would it have been when you first got involved? 90.
Well, I did the first time Rip came up to Canada just to do a demo with Beaver Bill. Yeah. I was one of, I think there was a half a dozen people that went to that. They were going to run a course. They didn't have people. Ken got stopped at the border, wasn't allowed to cross. And so Rip came up and just did the demo in this huge tree. And I was hooked when I saw that. So I signed up for the first set of courses. It was
so what do you think? What do you think? Like, was it the technique, the delivery? Like, what hooked you?
Yeah. I think part of it was that it was so the techniques that were coming along, the gear that was coming up hadn't been introduced to the industry yet, and there were so many advancements. It seemed like weekly or monthly, because the arborists are such a creative group of people, and even the trainers are. You look at the stuff that Rip and Ken developed with the modern friction savers and things like that. That are the climbing saddle advancements, just getting into what are now seemed antiquated, but you get into that whole Arbor Master series of saddles,
Yeah.
and versions now that are now company saddles for Bartlett, like Erg-Lite and those kind of things, which then led onto the Ergovation and the Truffle Burger and all those other
Yeah.
saddles and gear, all stemmed from that beginning. As you
Yeah.
remember Dave from Victoria,
Slidell. Yeah.
because he came over to a course that you and I were teaching in New West, and he
Yep.
was the arborist and he came over to learn the Blake hitch.
Correct.
Because this was all the rage at that time, this new thing, because everybody was climbing on the taut line. The ropes had just gone over to 16 strand, and the hitches weren't holding. They were sliding.
Yeah.
And then he looks at it, and I don't know if you remember his comment, but he says, Blake hitch. He says, that's the painter hitch. We used to use that when we're painting the outside of buildings. So they'd already been using that in a different application. So the way things got modified, a real cool one was again that what did we call him? Bruce was Silverback, and then Otis. When we were sitting around that first night at the cabin, and Otis had all this different rope stuff with double knots and how to set this and that and the other thing, and it was everybody was so creative. And then Frank developed what was called the weapon at the time for the competition, where you could foot lock up with the machad and the double ring and be able to extract it, when he was doing competitions, and all those ideas and innovations, that came along. And then because of things like Arbor Master, I was training. You sent me down to Minneapolis to the conference, and I was doing an aerial rescue thing, a bucket rescue thing for Arbor Master, Arb Canada at the time. I can't remember. But I was down there doing this, and it might have been for North American for Scott. I really can't remember. But the first, what was that one? Kind of like a zigzag. It had kind of like an accordion kind of deal that you ran your rope in for mechanical hitch.
Unisender?
Unisender. And one of the old boys of arboriculture was testing it out and was letting me climb on it and play with it. And it's same with the lock jack and things like that. Like our primary line now for hitches is a modified ice that we use in the shop here. And you and myself and Norm and Johnny and we're down at Samson Ropes, with Dr. Chu, and he's saying, well, tell me what you want the rope to do. Well, we want it to do what this 10X does, but not fucking melt. And he says, okay, I can do that. So then they sent us the first ice to test, but it was too slick. The coating was too slick. It was sliding too quick and not holding quite as much. And then they modified it, and now all my crew uses that as their primary hitch. Those kind of things and the innovation. I still have the what was the 7/16 line that Arbor Master came out with? The 9/16, the one below half inch. It came in orange, and it came in blue and green. It was a 24 strand, and I can't remember what the name was.
Velocity.
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 I still have a 70-foot Velocity, which was the first one that they gave Rip Tompkins to test. I have that in a bag in my shop. Yeah. And then we were going through the shop down there at Samson, and there was a different weave for a 16 strand that they had tested, and it wasn't quite enough difference from the Arbor Master lines. And he says, if you want it, you can take it. So of course I took it. So I've got these little bits and pieces as we went along. I've got some of the gear from Otis. I've got some of those very first lines that were changed. I've got the first. Remember when they sent us the Ergovations, the first build of the Ergovations. Yeah. I still have that with all the components. At that point I was starting to get out of climbing every day. So mine still looks pretty brand new. But it's pretty neat to have all that stuff.
Yeah, it's cool.
And associate
and I think that kind of thing still continues, but I think it's different now in the way things get shared, and especially because of, I guess, social media or the internet. It's so easy to certainly at least see what's out there and see it maybe in use and or operation, compared to when the training revolution, I guess you could call it, started, it was really still a traditional style of you had to see it or learn it from somebody. You know, the internet. I'm not saying we were so far back there was no technology, but it wasn't like it is today. And I think that's
No, not
why.
at all. Like, the advancements are quicker. The difference, Dwayne, is back then. I mean, we were lucky with Arb Canada and Arbor Master that we had companies like Samson Ropes and things like that. But Rock Exotica and Petzl, those kind of things weren't on board yet with arborist
No,
materials and arborist supplies. And that's the
right.
difference, is these guys are coming up with these innovations, and these major companies are helping them push it along. Even like the Zigzag. I mean, that first one I climbed in looked like it was put together in a back shed somewhere. And that was the case until it was designed. But now they're partnering up with these bigger companies. But some of the innovation. Look what Will Coombton and Brian French have come up with Ascending the Giants. Some of their techniques that they use for tree transfers and things like that were amazing. I mean, we did some neat stuff, but the stuff that they're doing now is so much more advanced.
There's the secret weapon. There's a lot of, I hear that one comes up all the time. And I don't think anybody really understands the history of the secret weapon and the terminology of it. And so just explain, I know it, Thor, but I want to hear it from you because you were there part of it. What exactly was the secret weapon and how was it used?
It was really quite simple. It was basically a double loop with buck rings on either end. And it was used on a double rope technique so that you could tie it on with a machad, and footlock up secured with your double rope system attached to it. So you could footlock up, lock it off, and then work your double rope system and keep going up. And it was awesome in competition. I think Frank might have been the first one to use it in competition.
He was.
He could set his rope in the top of the tree, footlock up to wherever he needed to go, and then still work a double system to get to the access points. And it was pretty good. And when you're a judge.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Dwayne.
It was the beginning of where the whole spiking below the knot started.
Yeah,
because
that's exactly it.
It didn't really. We never did spike it. Like Frank and I were. It was a climbing course in Red Deer, and we were mucking around thinking, and I remember it popping into my head. And I went to the car and I started cutting the rings off of a friction saber, and he's looking.
I did the same one. I still got the first one I made after Frank showed me that. I made one,
and I tied it on. And we just tied it, and I tied it on. And as soon as I was halfway done putting it together, Frank's like, "Oh!" And he knew exactly where I was going with it, right? And we both built one that day. Who made it? But Frank used it. But see, I was climbing in competitions. I won the aerial rescue event chapter. I shouldn't say this on tape here. I would footlock with a big machad, just tied off, but I would keep a beaner, and I had two beaners. So when I got up to where the dummy was, I would take a lock, pull down, and I would just clip into the second beaner. So I was really tight to the machad, and I could just work the machad. And I just went out to the dummy on the machad, pulling two lines. It was SRS, but it was with two ropes. I'd hook into the dummy, and I'd descend. I never unclipped nothing. It was SRS all the way, baby. But nobody knew what the hell I was doing. And no one ever called me on it. No one ever called me on it.
One of the interesting things, Dwayne, about being at the beginning of it all is seeing these things and working through them, right?
It was Sorry. I wanted to think of a way that I could do it properly, not have to go SRS. Hence, but a pulley was too fast, and if you could only slide a friction saver along, then you'd be in the friction saver already. And I literally tried tying a friction saver on the rope with multiple wraps and tying it, but it always slid, right? And then it was just bing, put it into. And that was it.
That was sort of what we tried to do with the friction saver. Remember when we were working with Trail with the Fortis guys for the hydro guys?
Yeah, exactly.
We kind of set up that system for them to be able to rappel off a double rope system on the poles. I rubber coated a couple of friction savers, did all sorts of stuff to get them to stick to the pole a little bit better.
Exactly.
But being
And
at the
trying
beginning,
to pass over. Yeah.
you talk about the beginning. One of the things that was super interesting was, well, there was a million things, but Frank had just set the world record for footlock and he was kind of my understudy when we were training together. So I got to stand and talk and be the big man, and he got to do all the demos, and I got to just point. So, so at that time, there was all this talk about how much you couldn't rescue off the tail of a double rope system. You couldn't climb up on a double rope system, right? And rescue. So we'd set it up. We're going, and you had done this at other courses and told us to set it up. So we set up the dynamometer at the top of the tree. And of course, Frank's footlocking. And so he footlocks up and he measures what the peak hold was. And it was almost 5 times, just under 5 times his weight. It was 4.5 times his weight. So I think he weighed about 185, and he was pushing 800 pounds with peak force load because he would spring up, right? So then he comes down, and I waddle my way up the rope to about 40 feet and, do a footlock up, and he's going to come up and rescue me off of a prusik. So I climb up and I'm hanging there, and he comes up, gets me, brings me down, and then we lower the dynamometer to see what the peak force load was. So one guy was close to 800 pounds the way he was climbing. With my fat ass, and then Frank footlocking underneath me, we hit a peak load of just a shade over double our weight. I was the mass dampener in between. We talked about this last time, and it was an amazing revelation of how we just didn't understand the physics of it all. That F word, as Norm used to say.
The F word. Yeah. You think back to stuff like that, and then just really the principles what we were doing were the same of what guys are doing today. It just applied differently. Like everyone forgets. I think it was Pittsburgh in 2004 at the ITCC. Bettis footlocks up, and about 3/4 of the way up a line, he stops.
Yeah,
and he secures himself off, and then he ties 2 midline loops. Puts a revolver pulley in each midline loop, threads a moving rope system through there, and works the tree off of that. And it's like it's the very same concept and principle that like everyone now is sort of calling revolutionary, for lack of a better term. But we've been doing it for a long time. We've gotten more efficient at it. And the things like the secret weapon, but I've heard it described by a number of people, and it's like, you're not describing a secret weapon. You don't understand the history of it and where it came from.
Well, and just to finish on the weapon, I went to Norm and I said, Norm, and I had the big idea. Well, Frank first of all was like, we can't tell anybody this is the secret weapon, man. This is this will make it break it, right? That's how it ended up being called the secret weapon. At first, now it's just the weapon because it's no secret anymore. But I said to Norm, I said, and we originally spliced it on Vectran because we were playing around with Vectran. I still have one of the original ones made on Vectran.
Mine's spliced on Vectran.
Yeah, well, the first ones were all made with Vectran. And
Norm showed me up, and I did you did a double locking Brummel around the one end.
That's
and
right.
then just back spliced put the loop in and did a double berry on the other end.
And what I wanted to do is I said, Norm, we need to make some of these. I said, we need to make it a tool. It needs to not be, and it needs to be spliced, not tied with knots. And this way it could be marketed as an actual tool. It was like, it's designed for purpose for this application. One ring floats, the other ring's fixed. And also I wanted it to be able to have a way to use it. And we designed it that way so that it could actually be extracted properly without jamming up or getting stuck. And, but Norm didn't like Vectran. And as things go, it never did get to be a rope tool for sale.
Vectran was so hard to cut. It was so hard to cut and so hard to work with, and it frayed so easily. It just wasn't.
And it would cut itself, like it would abrade itself. And that's why we went away from it. And you got to remember, there wasn't any heat resistive cording. Ice wasn't out yet.
No, it wasn't. So not at that point.
And we couldn't use Technora or Ultratech because they didn't work.
Here's a story, Dwayne, for you. So you and I did the Hort show in Vancouver, that big trade show that they do, the CanWest Hort show.
Yeah.
You and I did some stuff down there, some training, and we're doing a talk. So this is typical Dwayne. We're sitting there. There's about 200 people in the audience. There's a big crowd, and he's walking through, high fiving people, and going, "I remember you. Just you were in my class in Olds College like 15 years ago. You know, that kind of stuff." We lost Dwayne, which isn't. You there, Dwayne?
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
And
I can hear you.
and doing that kind of stuff. And then as we're setting up and chatting and doing some other stuff, Rupert Evans comes over, and someone had given him a whole bunch of ham steel, and he's going, look at this stuff. And I said, yeah, that's am steel. And he said, oh, this is great. He said, look at how this stuff's so strong and it doesn't stretch. He says, I'm going to climb my timing hitch out of this. And I'm going, no, I don't think so, because it melts at just a super low temperature. But it was at that stage where guys were just doing shit, without fully understanding the ramifications or what they were doing. And that's how a lot of stuff got learned. And, some of it really good and some of it not so much.
Yeah, it's true. And the other thing that is, I certainly need to remember, I think, is there's so many iterations, Tony, and it's part of the beauty of it. I thought, I don't know if Frank and I would tell that story exactly the same way, but I'm pretty sure that was the first secret weapon ever made. I think under the bridge, I could take you right to the spot in Red Deer where it happened, but who knows? I mean, somebody could have, I don't know, it got adapted and modified so quickly.
I think it's the same way with arborists. Like Shigo had a saying. He said that, and we talked about pithy points and that. I'm looking for that CD. I've got it somewhere.
Okay.
Where he's talking, he's in his little house in Denbo, and you can hear the clock in the background and him chuckling and everything else. But he used to say that people who work with trees know far more than they're able to explain. And I think it's the same with arborists and their gear. They figure things out. They're innovative. They understand what's going on. They may not be able to fully articulate it, but they're innovative. And there's stuff. I know there's stuff that I've done and rigging scenarios and things that I've done that'll just, when I'm working with the crews now and talking about jobs and how to set it up, things are coming back to me that we've done and we've trained at one site, or some unique situation happened, because our training sites were unique and it wasn't a classroom, it was outside, and you're working with trees and tools and guys, and on things like the advanced rigging courses and the advanced felling, where we're teaching guying and lifts and drifts and all that kind of stuff. I always tried to set up one scenario for a group that was virtually impossible, and it was likely to fail. And I explained it to them that this is your scenario. You've got to get this tree and there's something, an immovable object, and you've got to fall it and then move it and then lift it over top of another object and set it down over here, kind of thing. And how are you going to do that? And you get them thinking outside of the box, and some of the stuff that they would come up with, you're going, wow, didn't think of that. That'll work. It's and that kind of stuff keeps coming back to me, as we're doing things, because in the real work field, when we're out there actually doing a job, you can't push something to the limits of failure. You have to be kind of a little bit inside that box. So the training offered us, especially those sites at UBC where we could take down anything we wanted because they're going to build a condo there, and you have these massively forward leaning alders and all sorts of stuff that you could play with and rig with. And how tight an angle can you actually go to guy a tree? Well, we've got a whole scenario here where, okay, let's just keep moving it in until it doesn't work no more. And then now we got a baseline,
it's true.
It was awesome. It was so much fun.
Yep.
Other than Dwayne putting me on the spot just about every time when we were doing the precision cuts and everything else, he just, got it all set up. Thor, you're first. Here you go.
That's Thanks. Where I learned that from. Now I know where I got that from, because that was my favorite thing to do.
I became really good at tight bore cuts because the first one that I ever did was taking the Arbor Games course Tim Ard was teaching. And he was my mentor and still is as far as chainsaw techniques go. And I never seen it, and he's cutting, he's getting it all set, and Tim dials it up. It was all, he had it painted and markered. Like we had a 1/4 inch aside, and every 1/8 of an inch was a deduction, and he's explaining it all, and he demos it. And I had kind of, I was the organizer for the whole thing, right? I was the organizer for the first Arbormaster courses out in the prairies here. And, he looks over at me, and he says, "You're first." And like I'd never done it. Never done one ever, right?
And you did that to me.
Well, it wasn't just the fact that I did it, Ted, as I did what I was taught to do.
Exactly.
No, I think you were just a mean prick at times. That's all.
Well, it was Tim's. He kind of knew me, and I was kind of the leader of the event, sort of like, and I guess he knew me the best, so he's like, "You're first," and and he put a saw on the line. And so winter's going to get a saw.
With Husky. That was the nice thing with Husky is we could always buy a saw. Do you remember a girl, and I think an arborist out of North Van, her name was Josie?
Yeah, I remember Josie Blur.
Yeah, Josie Blur. So she was in that chainsaw course with Norm and I, with the first one.
Yeah.
And bar none, Karen Blair's wife was in one as well that Norm and I taught. And there was a couple other women in those courses. And every time that we had a woman in the course, they always won that competition. They were just calmer. And the guys are trying to show off and all nervous and everything else. And these women had nothing to prove. They just went up and did it. Yeah. It was interesting.
Well, I blew mine out pretty badly. It was quite embarrassing. And he wouldn't let me do another one either. It was one shot. I had to watch everybody else go and do better than I did, right? And ever since then, I practiced and I made damn sure I was good at it. I don't know if I've ever done that badly again, but it's a powerful lesson, right? Because it really is. Well, I mean, if you ever did blow it out, I don't remember it, Thor, because you got pretty good at it.
No, I got lucky the first time, and I practiced a shit ton before the second time. Do you remember Bruce explaining what a tater newton and a shit ton was?
No.
Oh, yeah.
So a tater newton is 250 pounds. Mm-hmm. And a shit ton is 3 tater newtons. So if it's 750 pounds, it's a shit ton.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, those are the days of the taters and the Jethros and the Bubba teeth that came out. Those are funny times. There was a lot of funny stories that took place in our travels. I just recently told the story
that both you and I can't tell in public ever.
Well, I just told recently.
I'll hold you to that because I got a couple on you, brother.
Well, I just told recently the one about. I was reminded of the Yukon I picked up at the airport. And I got to tell you, Thor, to this day, it's a running joke with the guys. And most guys don't even know where. Yeah, nobody knows even where it comes from. But Thor, I mean, I'm curious how you would tell that story.
Well, that was I think I told that last time. Probably didn't come out too clear. But we were going to trail to teach. You flew in, I think, to Kelowna or Penticton.
Yeah,
and I had all the West Coast gear at my place. Yeah. I was doing most of the West Coast stuff. So he drove down, we picked up all the gear, and we're driving out to trail, which is about a 4.5 hour drive. And it was summertime to work with these, with Fortis. And we're basically driving in the car, designing the course we're going to teach as we're going along, because we're dropping trees onto lines and teaching them how to take them off.
Yeah.
And we're driving along and just uncomfortable. It's just hot. And I'm like, Jesus, I'm just sweating. I just can't believe this. It's running down the crack of my ass. Terrible seats, terrible seats. And Dwayne, he kept it together. And it was probably midway through day 2 or day 3. We were actually on our way up. You and I went for a little side drive up to Red Mountain. We had a little bit of a break. And I ran into a buddy of mine from Summerland up at the top there. And on the way up, you just fucking burst out laughing. You couldn't hold it in anymore. And then you showed me the heated seats. I don't know if I was just pissed or humble.
Well, it was they were first out. They were just been released. Like no one had them before. And this rental was a decked out Escalade and it had the seat. So, I just turned them on to try and I forgot, of course. And then you started driving. And, when you first complained about it, I laughed, and I was going to tell you, but we'd get talking about something. Like you say, we were planning things and that went the whole trip.
You didn't forget. You left it on
I did.
purpose.
I honestly did forget. And I would tell myself, I got to tell him, the poor guy. And then you'd calm down. And the one that killed me, it was well into the trip. You took your hat off and you just whipped it into the dash and it stuck between the windshield and the defrost vent. It just, this truck is hot. It was hilarious. Again, I go off, but it was the next morning. We were just leaving and you get in the truck, we had supper and everything else. We recorded those out of attention to chain videos in the hotel rooms. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
And, good thing I still have those videos. But anyway, we get in the morning and we don't get 10 minutes down the road and you're going, I can't believe this truck. And that's when I was like, okay, I got it. Thor, look. Oh man, it was funny. Yeah,
that was great training, and then Norm and I went back out there after that, and we did confined space chainsaw use because they had these areas in front of the dams. We had a blast with that.
And I went out and did it another time with Zach. Actually, Zach and I went out there and did the same course. But we haven't been out there for a while. It was a lot of fun.
Just there's one other one. You can get Rupert to tell you the toast end of the story when you get Rupert on. But we were out at UBC and I was still pretty rookie, and Norm was my mentor at the time, and we're staying out at this hotel and we'd been out to Blair Beach's place the night before. Norm had a couple of drinks and I wanted to go home and get some rest, and he wanted to stay and keep chatting with Blair and Karen, and he had a vehicle. He'd get back the next day, no problem. So here it is, and I'm cooking breakfast, and Norm's not there, and I'm starting to panic, because where is he? Norm had a sense of humor and some other things that caused him to be. Norm had a personality where he just kind of went along at his own little pace, and nothing really seemed to matter much. And then I hear this banging on the sliding door of the room that we're in, which is on the bottom floor, and I open it up and Rupert jumps in, and him and Norm have concocted this damn story, because I'd only assisted Norm maybe 2 or 3 times at that point, and Rupert's going, Jesus Christ, Norm's still drunk, he's over at Karen's, he can't wake up, we tried, it's done, you got to teach the whole thing by yourself today. And I'm going, fuck. No. And it went on and on and on, and they just milked me until Norm came up over the balcony, and I was just But there's a little part about toast in there that you'll have to ask Rupert about that I'm not going to explain.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can have Rupert tell that part. He was probably he was witness to the entire event. So
he was a compatriot of Norm's. They had kind of concocted this whole thing where he would come up and get me all worried up.
As we're talking about all this, Thor, it makes me think about, for people listening to this that, listen to a bunch of old guys telling stories, but how much tree work, some parts of it maybe never change. Like when you're on a crew, I think back to, I don't know, maybe everyone has an experience, maybe not, but it certainly was an experience on our training team. I think it still exists today. It's something that evolves between people, employees, coworkers, it turns into friendship, and then into joking around and just having fun and learning, I've been part of crews where it's a blast every day you go to work, you can take a tree apart and stuff the chipper and get the invoice in the mailbox so fast people, by the time you knock and tell them you're there, you're already leaving. And they can't believe how fast you did it. And all that's left is the stump is half ground already, and I think we had a lot of that. In those days,
that, Dwayne, is, and I'll hand it to you, and I'll hand it a little bit to Rip and Ken, and Tony and all the guys that train the trainer, it's a faith and a trust in each other. You asked me to do some stuff on those training courses, and I never questioned it because I trusted your judgment, because the next course, when you're doing a demo or something, your life was in my hands, and
Right.
literally our life was in each other's hands. And that's the same with a really tight crew. I see it
Yeah.
with my guys. You know,
Yeah.
if you have a tight crew in this industry, you know, it's necessary, because it is a life and death issue, and your life
Right.
is on the line, and what you do is going to affect, and what we taught these guys to be safer and to give better techniques and everything else. I mean, I was telling you that story where you know, we had that one guy, that school teacher. I mean, he took all 3 courses back to back. He took climbing, he took chainsaw, and then rigging, and he'd never picked up a chainsaw before. You know, so I'm tied into one tree and I'm swinging over, helping him set up his notch and everything else, and swinging back and forth and teaching these guys. And we had the one old guy, Husky used to have the shirts. I still got mine that had the chainsaw padding in the upper portion, and it had a little bit of that collar. I don't know if you still have one of those or not, but they were great. And it was I think you were with me on the course. It might have been Norm. It was he came back to course about 6 months later, and he had a kickback that hit him in the shoulder, and it was because of the shirt that he saw us wearing that he said saved his shoulder and his neck.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's these little things, and you know, sitting in the hotel room with Frankie Chips splicing tie-dyes out of 10X to give away to the students and have enough to climb with. You know, those are some of the best times. Just shooting the shit, doing stuff. Well, you know, when we had the competition in Kelowna, the ISA, and Tain was here, and myself, and why can't I think of his name from the Irrigation, who has North American Training Solutions? Help me out, Tony.
Ed.
What's that?
Ed.
Yeah. Ed was here. Brian French was here. Rupee was here. Rupee's little underling Ryan was here. And we're just sitting around the shop, splicing ropes and making prizes and all that kind of stuff, and sharing stories. And then you look at guys, like I was saying last time, like Brian French, who came to your courses as a rookie climber, and he so far exceeds everything that I could ever have hoped to have been, you know, with his skill level and what he's done. But I think that it makes me proud that these guys are so much better than I was, but I had a hand in getting them started. You know, that's just, it's a good feeling. You know, I love it when people exceed, when you show people stuff and then they exceed your abilities.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then you see guys like your son, the picture, your son, my son, and Norm's son all standing together at a climbing competition.
Yeah.
And that was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and Noah's son too. You know, I think you touch on an important.
Yeah, Luke.
Luke, touch on an important point of the, you know, that I hadn't thought of. Well, I hadn't thought of at this moment, at least, was, you know, we are, you know, that was always paramount, you know, especially after Pete's fatality, that, you know, the gravity of what we do, and, you know, learning about the fatalities in the industry. And we really, you know, it was always paramount. It still is. It's always the primary focus is to help people stay safe, you know, just number one by far. And, you know, and there's not many groups, you know, where you can, you know, just do a shout out at an industry event and ask how many people know someone or have had someone they know pass away on the job, you know, or be killed. And the hands go up, you know, and that's probably part of what breeds the stuff we're talking about. It's the you know, even the playing hard stuff, you know, not just the joviality, the joking, but even some of the, you know, the stuff that we don't want to talk about often, like the substance abuse and alcoholism potentially even is part of that, goes along with all of that stuff, I think. And we haven't talked about that with you yet, Thor. I'm not. It just brought up that it's a powerful industry in so many ways, and, you know, you can witness things that can really, you need an outlet for it sometimes, you know.
That I've never strayed down that path, and I've had some very, very dear friends, as you well know, that have. But
Yeah.
the support is there if they reach out, and there's never been the interesting thing about the people in the industry that I've known and are quite close to that have gone down that path is that there was support, not judgment.
Hmm.
And that's and because we've all been there and seen some stuff we ought not to see. Wes Hawley comes to mind, as a good friend that was a fatality. He sat on the Arborist Apprenticeship Committee
Right.
and
Yeah.
had a fatal fall and left a wife and 2 kids. And I was pretty close to Wes,
Yeah.
and what
Oh,
happened
yeah.
to Lutz, the fact that he even walked away from that. And I had a climber fall not long ago, and got banged up pretty good. He fell 40 feet.
Yeah.
And here's a guy that's my lead hand, our safety coordinator, and just went to the his first climbing competition with your son and with Luke, and made the Masters Challenge. Goes down to the internationals. Did I think it was top 10 or 12 down there, or not the internationals, but the PNW competition. It was top 10 or 12. Good guy, really good guy. 2 weeks after he gets back from I think it was Idaho last year. He throws in a line and he can't quite see it. And he's going up SRT. Well, it was one of the same kind of things that happened to
the man.
Another guy, and I can't. My names are bad. I remember every tree I've ever touched. I hardly remember a face I've ever seen, which doesn't work so good with women. But so he puts his line up into this pine tree, and from the ground it looks like it's over a big limb, but it's actually tucked into a smaller one behind. And this branch, the small branch, it's only about 1.5 inches, has a little side branch that's over top of the big branch. So when they double tested it, they had 2 guys pull on the line and stand on it. And because of the way it was hooked up, it seemed fine. But as soon as he was going up SRT and had to wiggle over around some branches, it pulled that overhanging branch back and it slipped off. And he fell somewhere between 25 and 35 feet, somewhere in that neighborhood. He tried grabbing a few branches on his way down. Really buggered up his ankle, his hip. He didn't break anything, shoulder. He was really lucky. And he's probably about 8 to 10 weeks before he was back climbing again. It didn't affect him mentally, but I know some other guys that have had some falls that couldn't get up in the tree again. I had one. It was only maybe 15 feet. I had just gone through my divorce, and I was not in the best mental state. I should have been in euphoric, but I wasn't. He caught that one. Good catch, Tony. And so I brought out Frank Chips and his brother Pete to come and help me in this big golf course contract.
Yeah.
So I was going ahead, setting lines and working ground for these guys as they were climbing. And one of my guys, you met Russ Hinter. He had been on a bunch of our Harbor Master courses.
Yeah.
So I had these guys, and it was great because Russ was trying to keep up with Frank, and it was working well. We were just pounding the job off. But one of the guys had gotten a friction saver stuck in one of the trees, and I said, "Hey, I'll go up and get it." So I'd set a line, and I had my Sorels on. I didn't even have climbing boots on it. So I put my saddle on and I put a Pantene on. And as I was going up, I had set I had choked a single rope off up on the top.
Yeah.
Sent up a running bowline. And I didn't tie the tail on away. I just wasn't thinking. They were both hanging there, and I got up about 15 feet. And rope came out of my Pantene because I didn't put the little catch beaner in there. So I just reached down, grabbed the rope, tucked it back in. Well, it's the wrong fucking side. So it just undid the choke, and I just went thump onto my back. And there was about 1.5 feet of snow, and I'm just lying there completely winded, fucking wind like a guppy on the beach, And lucky that's all that happened, but it happened so fast. Like we were talking about dudes in I think it was dudes in Winnipeg who had about a 40-foot fall. And you ask him how long it takes to fall 40 feet. And he goes, fuck! That's it. Can't even get the whole word out. And you're on the ground. So it can happen in our industry quicker than you can. I think our industry is so much safer than it used to be because of the gear, the equipment, the people that have been there, done that, and the stories we can tell. It still shocks me, that there's still between 3 and 5 people that go through chippers every year in North America, that
Yeah.
the death rate's still as high as it is,
Yeah.
but it's still an unregulated industry.
Yeah.
We're trying, but it's not a red seal yet. It's not an official trade. There's no training program. You need a chainsaw pickup truck and a set, and you can call yourself a tree guy.
Well, and we're dealing with massive living things, that, have a lot of potential energy sitting there, that when it's released has to go somewhere, and normally down.
Yeah.
Generally
Generally speaking, gravity works. As we get older, we can tell that just when parts of our body are sagging a little more than they used to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just anything.
Ricky Gervais does a nice thing about that. He says, "What do you hate about being older?" He says, "Pendulous testicles."
Oh man. Well, we've reached new. This episode is definitely reached new ground, Tony. We've crossed new ground. We may have to put a disclaimer.
I got something I want to show you here. I don't know if you can see that, Dwayne. You see that?
Oh yes.
Glenn both have one of these. I don't know if you ever framed yours.
Yeah. Mine actually is at the office. Yeah.
Yeah, mine's over
from Glenn, and then I got another one. I got another one for you. This one unfortunately got water damage, but I still keep it on the windowsill of my office. There's this really young guy in the top picture there.
Yeah.
And then there's Norm and me in the bottom. That's when we first started. You gave this to me the first Christmas after I started training with Norm.
Oh wow!
Double photograph, and it says Arbor Master at the bottom, not Arb Canada.
Yeah, Nance had those made for all the guys.
And then the interesting thing is that you look at the Husky helmets. You look at the helmets they're climbing on now. The Petzls and the Cask, and one of my guys has one of those other newer ones that I can't remember the name of that cost a king's ransom, but they're amazing. But what we thought was amazing, that Husqvarna cut the brim off a hard hat. So you didn't strain your neck.
Yep.
That was innovative back then, but that was the start. And now the new helmets that come out, they have the visors that tuck into the helmets, the earmuffs. We're using Sena communication systems, that are completely Bluetooth. So all my crews have those, and they can communicate really well and everything else. So but it all starts with somebody cutting the brim off a hard hat.
Mm-hmm. I remember
that's how innovation starts.
We were
one guy comes up with the idea. It's like the weapon. One guy comes up with the idea, and the next guy goes, "Hey, but if we did this, or what if we did that, and let's advance it here." And before you know it, it's a whole new animal. But it started somewhere.
Yep. Well, yeah.
That was one of the best things with Arb Canada and the group of guys, because they were so and guys that would come to courses that had ideas and things would bring them along. And they would ask, "What do you think of this? Would this work? Is this safe?" All that kind of stuff with different things that we hadn't even thought of, but they've designed.
Yeah, and I think it still happens. I think that there's.
It does.
I wonder though. Tony has made an observation about this in the past, and Tony, I don't know. I think, let me just take a stab at this, and you can correct me, Tony. I'll speak for you because I've heard it a few times, but it used to be that the innovations would solve a problem, not just be a different way of doing something. Is that fair statement, Tony? Or?
Yeah, I mean, the classic example is, why we went away from the taunt line hitch to the Blake's hitch, because when we switched from 3-strand rope to braided rope, taunt line hitch started to roll. So new knot, it was like, it's all the rage, but it just solved an issue for us, right? And then when you put the micro pulley underneath it, that gave us slack tending and all those things, and it just really solved the problem. And what really brought it home is when we talked to Don Blair. I asked Don, I think his podcast might not be on next. But anyway, I asked Don, I said, if you were going to invent, XYZ climbing thing, right? Whatever, the newest thing, XYZ climbing tool, how would you go about it? And he said the first thing he would do is look for a need. He said said the absolute first thing he would do is look for a need in the industry. I'm like, now there's a man that's invented some stuff, right? That we still use
That's
this day.
that's the same in any industry. My father-in-law back in the late 40s, early 50s had service rigs out in Saskatchewan, and as you know Dwayne, it gets down to -50, and they couldn't get these service rigs started up. So he invented this system where you could pull out there in a truck and you could couple your cooling system from the truck to the rig, and you could run the hot water from the truck through the rig to warm it up, fire right up, -30, -40. Never patented it. Within a year, every company was doing it. But it was a need for the industry that he came up with. And there's lots of those. I mean, Greg Goods, like the GCRS. People don't know that it stands for goods. Greg's invention.
Good rigging
Goods
control
rigging
system.
Control system, based after him. And it was cool. I got into sailing, and I'd sailed at quite a competitive level on Melges 24s and a 53-foot sailboat. I did Victoria to Maui and that kind of stuff. But the winches, that's the sailing winch, a Harkin sailing winch. So when I started sailing, I got onto the sailboat and I looked at this thing and I'm going, that's from arboriculture. Well, no, it's arboriculture stole it from sailing to make something that can lift. And that was so far superior to the 5-to-1 systems that we were using, which I've got an old video. I think I have the set in here actually somewhere. I've got the old Arbor Master set, and there's you and Scott pushing the 5-to-1 up, but still standing under the load. And then the next one, you've got to redirect, and you're doing it along this way, parallel to the ground, out from under the load. And then along comes Greg, why don't we just hand crank this with a 16-to-1 or a 40?
Well, and it's funny you talk about that because the Hobbs actually, it did that stuff, but the Hobbs was a little slower and bulkier. But I mean, the Good really was like the Hobbs was around before the Goods even.
I had a Hobbs before I still have my Hobbs.
Yeah.
But you had to put the big pipe in there to do the crank, and you only had one speed, whereas the winches were 2 and 3 speed winches.
Oh, I know. Hey, it's just
40-to-1.
It's just for a lot of people, the Good was their first, and I think it's fair to, to even recognize that the Hobbs predated the Goods by at least 20 years. But it had its own panache and its own, we were talking with Don and we had him on the show, and he wants to do another one. Actually, he really enjoyed it, but he said they came up with it because they were doing a pine removal, and there was this weird lower branch on the pine tree it had been cut off. It was used as a little seat, and they just started taking wraps on it, and that's where the concept came for making the Hobbs.
It's super interesting, and then the way Greg did it, so that you can interchange a bollard with the winch itself, and then how to attach it to the tree. You can have the spike set up, or you can have the rubber set up so it doesn't damage the tree. And it was interesting. And then meeting Greg himself was awesome. It's such a humble.
There's another person we got to get on the show.
Yeah, he's so humble.
Greg solved the problem with, or the one issue with the Hobbs is he always had to have a second person to winch, to lift, right? So Greg made it true one person. Yeah. So what I always tell people when they ask about the difference, if you lower a lot and lift a little, get a Hobbs. If you lift a lot and lower a little, get a GRCS.
Yeah, or you can be like me, and this was a problem with everybody in the training industry, as we became gearheads. Right, the latest, the greatest.
Oh, yeah.
And companies would give us stuff to try, the different hitches, the different ropes, the different gear, and the lock jack when that first came out with the long tail. That was fun until I hooked it with my handsaw. You go for a little ride, So and then they shorten the tail and they make these other modifications. But I always went back to rope on rope. And most of my guys try these mechanical hitches, and they always go back to rope on rope.
I always tell guys too, it's like when something new comes out, like, does it solve a problem? If it solves a problem, let's have a discussion. If it's just new or a variation on a theme, then you're going to have to justify a little bit more, and that's not, I don't come out with all the mechanical climbing devices you would like, but unless it solves a problem for me, I don't need something
Yeah.
else. I don't need a variation on the theme. I can't tell something as ubiquitous as the Porter wrap, how many times I've seen it hooked on upside down.
Yeah.
Which is a testament to its engineering because it still works upside down.
It was what was, and it's interesting even about the inventor of that, Scott, because we've told this story before, where Scott Profit is working working it, and demonstrating his tool that he's invented, and he's talking about unfurling the hockles. And there was a guy in the course. He said, "Oh, it's great! And when you reverse the thing, it undoes the hockles every lift. So you just switch it over." And Scott, who invented the thing, is going, "Wow, that's didn't even know
I knew
that."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he faked it. He faked it. Said, "Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yeah, well,
I was
yeah,
going to tell you that
Scott's,
next. Yeah, yeah, yeah."
yeah, of course. I planned it
I
that
don't
way.
think he
But
faked
you
it.
talk to Scott about
I
that
don't
over a
think.
couple of beers, and it's like, holy smokes, that's pretty little cool, and but it solved the problem. It solved the hockling
It did.
just by reversing the rope on the Porter wrap. And the reiterations of that to get to that one was pretty amazing. And then you see other guys like you're doing some big bombs, and I've watched guys pack the barrel with ice bags and stuff to keep it cold so you're not melting your line, and all
Yeah,
sorts of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Yeah, and that
You
was
know,
something
it's
built right into the good as well, where Greg made accommodations for that with the hollow bollard. Yep, it is a there is innovations and stuff going to happen all the time. I think, but it's I think it's a good. Well, I mean, we used to use acronym C, and I think that still applies. Does it make your job safer? Does it make your job easier? And does it make it more efficient? And ease and efficiency are not the same thing. Like some can be really easy but take a long time. Like a 50-1 moves the log really easily, but you got to pull for a long time.
Well, and that was another thing that we talked about in the course quite a bit. You can have something that's 100% safe, but it's so cumbersome it's never used. So
Right.
is it beneficial? Or you can have
Yep.
something that makes the job 80% more safe, but it's more efficient to use. Not 100%, but
Yeah.
it's efficient and everybody uses it.
Yeah.
Is that a better tool? Or is that a better
Yeah.
technique?
Yeah.
So it's different. Lots of acronyms. The only one
Oh
that
man.
never really worked was your to hell and back for cutting and
Yeah.
felling. It was just you
I
kind of
know.
had to mix the words a little bit.
I know. We never found out, man. And then we changed it to a 6-step plan to boot, Thor, because now it's a
Yeah, there you go.
6-step falling plan instead of a 5-step.
Just messing up the acronyms.
Yeah.
Thor, Dwayne and I were talking earlier, and I love your perspective. So it seems, when you look at trainers for almost every like major arboricultural organization, Arbor Master, North American, even Arbor Canada to an extent, there seems to be a lifespan of like say 5 to 7 years ish, right? For a trainer, for a full time, people tend to get involved. They get heavily involved, and then they just kind of back out. Right. And there's many reasons behind it. I was just wondering what you're like, why do you think it is that way? It seems to be fairly consistent. That 4 to 5, 7, there's exceptions to every rule, of course.
I think what happens is especially when we started, things were so innovative, and Dwayne developed the courses. We all had input on some of the courses that were developed thereafter, and some courses like Dwayne and I did that one course kind of designed it as we're traveling in the car, and everything was innovative and everything was new. And then after a while, you still have to teach the same stuff. You still have that beginner climber that you have to teach again. And as much as it's a passion and that you really want to do it, it becomes repetitive, over time. You know, I was fortunate to be at the beginning when we had the first climbing course, the first felling courses, the first rigging, and then we did advanced rigging, then we did advanced felling, and then we did pruning, and then we did aerial rescue, and then we did tree risk assessment for climbers, which was completely innovative at the time. And to pass that on was awesome. But by the time 5, 7, 10 years rolls around, it's not quite the same anymore. There wasn't, it's time for that next generation to take over the excitement and add the new gear into the systems and some of the new ideas into the systems and the younger passion, about it. It's interesting though. I just looked at the new course schedule. I'm trying to get down and just kind of sit in the back room of one of the the new courses for Art Canada and see how they've changed and see what the new techniques are. Because we had one of the things that Dwayne was really big on is to find your story and to find your technique and what gives you the right to stand in front of these people with a story. And it's he called it earn the right, but I've always done that. I've always told stories, and it's the story that makes it. Some of Dwayne's were fibs, but that's okay. The one about the lost finger, that was bullshit. I would burnt off in a rope, but whatever. It worked for you at the time, and you were not a lead trainer, but it's these stories that attach us to the industry and everything else. And there's new stories that come along that we're not part of, and those younger people have to move it along. I want to be that old guy. Dwayne used to tell a story, and or maybe it was Norm. I think it was Norm. He said, when that old guy, that's hanging out around you, and he said, hey, Sonny, I can see what you're doing, but I don't think that's quite going to work that way. Don't shoo him away. He said he might have something, that knowledge base that's built up there, because trees react differently in different climates and different areas, and wood strengths are different, and elevation changes make it different into wood development and everything else. So that old guy, and that's us now, listen to us. We've got a little bit of wisdom and some years, but it's the young guys have to come on and carry the torch. And that's the way it is. It's not that I haven't lost my interest. I still do stuff. I did a Q&A at a garden show here recently, and they want us to do some more demos. And I love training days when Bartlett has Matt Beatty and the guys from Seattle and stuff come up, and we do training days. That's great. I love hanging out and interjecting once in a while, but I love watching everybody else do their thing, and just interjecting once in a while to impart some wisdom. Knowledge comes with learning, and wisdom comes with age and experience.
It's interesting. You've mentioned twice now, and DJ listened to the first podcast there, and he's like, "You lied to Thor, what?" And he wouldn't get off on it, and I vaguely remember that. But I mean, I didn't. It sounds like it. If it. I suppose I owe you an apology, and I will. I didn't.
No, it was a good story, and it worked, and you came clean eventually. But this was you were just starting with Ken and Rip at the time as an understudy at Arbor Master, right? And you were up, and we were. What the hell was his name? He still owes me $1,000. Guy from the Kootenays that came out and took a bunch of all the courses with me together, and I can't remember his name. I bought the hogs.
Ian.
So
McKay.
He had some dependency issues.
Yeah,
right. And he was really, really struggling, and so I that's where I got my hobs. I bought my hobs off him because he needed some money, and I gave him an extra $1,000. And he'll call me once, probably every 5 or 6 years, and say, "Hey, I still owe you that money." Like it's and I knew I wasn't going to get it back, but he was in those courses with me, and you were up in this massive poplar. We're setting up some zip lines and some cool stuff. Rip is teaching on the ground, and he's got you doing the fun stuff up in the trees. And when you came down, like, we were doing different rigging techniques, and when you came down, it was I was asking you about your finger, and you told me about, because we were discussing ropes and riggings and the pressures and how it can burn it off, and you told me that you'd had that finger in a natural crotch, and the rope had gone over it and ran so fast it just burned it clean off. That was the story that I was told, and that was the day that it was told to me.
You know what? I vaguely remember, and I didn't tell it very much. I soon realized, that just is a terrible thing to have to try to remember and keep up, because it's not part of my repertoire as a general rule. Like, certainly I wouldn't. And it was like DJ said, like, "Dad, how many of your stories are true?" Like, oh, jeepers creepers. So I need to. I appreciate your. I need to come clean on it, and I vaguely remember it, and I don't do it anymore. I don't know if I've done it since or not, but to anyone listening, if I've ever done that, I apologize.
Well, a lot of the stuff moving forward, where the experience that we've had and stuff, I don't ever remember embellishing anything, because the stuff that we do and the stories that we told. I mean, you were green as the fresh mown grass back then. You were still teaching at Olds. you know, you know,
Well,
you
I don't even
haven't,
think I was teaching there yet. Was I? I guess I just started. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's right.
So it, as we get older in the industry and we started to train, we've had these incidents and these things happen to us and to friends, and we've witnessed it. You know, I don't have to tell people what happens when you one hand a chainsaw. I can show them this scar on my wrist that goes from here to here where I hit myself. You know,
Yeah.
I was lucky. I exposed the tendons and the veins. I could watch my vein pumping and the tendon move and got into the meat over here. Didn't do much damage, but I can, you know, everybody's got a story. You know, I've got my buddy Sean Nemeth, who had Paragon Tree Service. That's when I first tried to climb. Was he'd showed me before I met you guys, and he's got a scar on his face here, and missing some teeth. He's one handing an 026 in a tree, and it went through and kicked back and plunged right through his face. You know,
Oh,
so these are people that we know, you know,
yeah.
and people that we've seen and things that have happened to us or that we were able to witness. I mean, you know, I use Peter Donzelli's story all the time about force loads and everything
Yep.
else. And there's an engineer and what can happen and how it can happen, you know, but
Yep.
these are real stories. And that's the only time that, and that's why I bug you about it. You know,
It's okay.
because you
It's
didn't,
okay.
and so was I. I mean, we were so young and so green. We didn't have the experience and the stories, and we didn't know the people back
Yeah.
then. It wasn't long after that Peter Donzelli had his accident, and then we
Uh,
had real stories to tell and real
well, you know,
wisdom.
I wish I would have told you the true story then, and it's a good lesson even now. So thanks for the reminder. Um, it's it's I just thought of something, and now it's escaped me. It must not have been that important, but it was about. Oh well, I I was gonna shoot. Must be getting to be that time.
That's the gray hair. On my little mushroom farm here, Dwayne, we grow lion's mane. It's great for dementia, and Alzheimer's reversal, and and prevention. I'll get you some.
Send me some. Send me some. Yeah.
You know, that I've found the years of being a trainer have taught me when you stand up in front of people and you start telling stories, there's the story you intended to tell, there's the actual story, and then somewhere in between is what you meant to tell. And it can be an interesting insight into yourself and your own mental state. But then also sometimes you do have to kind of change your story a little bit to bring it home closer for the students, you know, not necessarily embellish, but kind of bring out the details or the aspects of it
We,
that are
I
more
think
important to them.
I think you had Tony. I think you hit the nail on the head. You have to and that's what Dwayne meant by earn the right. And I never understood that when he first started teaching it. And I remember Johnny Ransom trying to tell it because he couldn't. You know, he was trying to force the earn the right. What gives you the right to stand in front of these students to tell them? And Johnny
Yeah.
struggled with that so much, you know, because he wasn't a natural storyteller. You know,
No.
but it's you have to feel it. You have to be sincere, and you have to tell stories that had an impact on you. That's the only way it's going to come across to the students. You may
Right.
tell it in a different dynamic. You may tell it in a different methodology or with a different outcome for what you're trying to get across. But the story has to be genuine, and you have to have the emotion involved
Yeah.
in the story that you're telling it. Being it excitement because you learned something new that you're trying to impart, or to build that excitement with somebody, or be it, you know, building caution, you know, with some of the things that we've seen and some of the things that have happened, you know,
Hmm.
and things in the industry. The internet and YouTube has really brought a lot of that home, where you can. And I don't know that that's such a good thing, because you become conditioned to the amount of tree failure videos that you can watch, and then it's
Yeah.
just another one. Oh, this one isn't as exciting as the last one, so you don't even watch it through. You know,
Right.
so you become almost conditioned to that stuff. You know, I think the stories from real people are so much better.
Mm-hmm. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. I would
Yeah.
totally agree. And I think how we tell them and when we tell them and why we tell them is a good insight into a lot of things.
Yeah, it is.
Because
And to
there's a story that happened, there's what you intended to say, and then there's what actually comes out of your mouth.
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, it's all good. You
yeah,
know.
it is.
Well, sorry, and wrapping up our second go around with you. I probably asked it to you last time, and I don't know how you answered it. Maybe you'd answer it differently this time, maybe not. But you know, being in the human forest, pretty much most of your career, I would say. You know, how has the human forest affected your life?
I think the as you get older, you realize that you learn something from everybody. And the one
Mm,
thing that being in part of the trainers that was really impactful for me
yeah,
is I've been out of it for 10 or 12 years. And then I know in my heart of hearts that if I needed you, or I needed Norm or Tony or anybody, if I needed somebody,
yeah,
I know that if I called Tain tomorrow and said, "Hey bud, I need you here," he'd come.
yeah,
And that's a compliment to the trainers, and I think it's a compliment to our industry,
hmm,
that it's a band of brothers.
right,
So it's impacted me, right down to the core. Absolutely right down to the core. You've taught me so much. And here's a story.
okay,
When we're doing the this will all end with this one because it's
okay,
impactful on what we're talking about. And it was with Neil Thiessen when we had to
yeah,
give each other negative criticisms.
right,
And you're standing there with your hands down by your side, in the open posture to accept something, and Neil paired us up,
yeah,
and you had to give me a negative criticism. Now you only come up to my navel, so it's you're looking up at me like this, and
yeah,
that made it more impactful because what you told me is because I'm very passionate about the industry and about when I teach and the points I want to get across, and I'm still that way. But I've learned to tone it down, and it was because of this one thing that happened to me, and it was you, and you said, Thor, you're a good trainer, and you're so passionate, but I think because of your size and your voice and how you present yourself, so animated, that these people are learning because they're intimidated, not because they're engaged.
mm,
That was super impactful. You taught me how to um, utilize different techniques and watch people. And I can tell when they're paying attention because they're intimidated, or they're paying attention because they're engaged.
right,
And that was an amazing lesson. And it was early on, that was a long time ago, our first session with Neil.
yeah, I
And,
remember that.
and that was super impactful. Right. And we all
Well,
have to learn. We all have to learn that. And of course, I told you that you're just a shitty driver, and quit driving with 2 fucking feet and jerking the car all around with the gas and the brake and the gas and the
yeah,
brake.
yeah.
And I drove next time.
No, you're right, and that observation has been that's still. I think I'm better, but that was something I did definitely have to work on. You were absolutely right. Tony could probably attest to that.
And
Yeah.
that was a 30-second thing that you and I did at one of the
Was at the
sessions with
Black
Neil.
Knight Inn. It was at the Black Knight Inn in Red Deer, which has now been torn down.
Yeah, and that was a 30-second thing that's impacted the way I teach, the way I talk, the way I explain jobs to my guys, the way I
Hmm,
discuss incidents and accidents, or
yeah,
or jobs that haven't gone well, or equipment that got damaged, or property that got damaged inadvertently. I'm able to kind of dial it back because of that 30 seconds.
wow. Well, that is a thank you, Thor, for that. It's a nice way to close off. Well, I'm glad we had a chance to redo it. I'm hoping our audio folks this time is better and not quite as garbled up. But and it's great to have you on the show again, Thor. Thank you so
Hey,
much.
it's been a pleasure. And if you ever get that desperate again, I'll come back.
Okay,
Okay.
well, we definitely are seeing do-overs, so
Mm.
I will probably hold you to it.